Hello and welcome to the second phase and panel of this initiative's topic, Marginalized People and LSR7. Before we start, I'd like to state some clarifications. First, this equity and diversity panel is brought to you by the LSW Student Senate, along with the help of the Student Senate sponsors, Mrs. Hill and Mrs. Jones, and with the approval and help from our principal, Dr. Herzog. Second, the term marginalized in many cases may be a word one isn't familiar with and can be taken into different interpretations. But for this panel, however, we factor this term to be the outcome of not having the appropriate discussions or measures of equity and diversity, hence this panel. While the district works tirelessly to work around COVID-19 for the fall semester, similar to the first panel, the LSW student leadership wanted to create a space where we could continue the conversation about this topic. So, Soph and I got a panel of 6 educators to represent each of the 3 high schools to answer questions from the LSR7 community. We would like to thank everyone for the questions, but again, not every question will be discussed, either because it does not pertain to the topic, overlaps and correlates with other questions, or just simply time constraints. Simply put, the goal is to become more unified as a community and schools. This can only happen if we understand one another and reflect and prevent these struggles from coming about in our school and ignite racial harmony. While these words may not pertain to you per se, but they ring true to your classmates, neighbors, coworkers. So please keep an open mind and heart. While this is only a discussion of understanding to ignite once more unity. Soph, take it away.
We wanted to thank you all, the panelists, for being here. We appreciate you guys saying yes to us and really just taking this on, because we know it's your summer too. So thank you again. And we also know that we are going to be entering a new school year this semester, after this summer, and it's going to be very different. And so we really just wanted to start a discussion and bring our community closer together. And that's why we wanted to have all 3 high schools. And so would everybody mind just saying hi and like doing a wave type of thing? So the people who are viewing will be able to see like who you are. Awesome. So number 1, describe equity beyond race.
When I think about equity beyond race, I think about our LGBTQ plus community. I think about our community with special needs, kids coming from different socioeconomic statuses, and those with invisible illnesses. And I feel like these kids need to not just feel safe in our district, but they need to see themselves reflected in our district and be able to embrace their identity, talk about it, and thrive because of it. Along with race as well. So I think we as teachers need to become more aware and open up our eyes, and speaking for myself especially, and open up our ears to listen to them. And I also think that something we can do is, or something I can do, speaking for myself again, is to stop assuming that a successful learner and a successful learning looks a certain way, like with kids heads down, quiet, compliant. And I think we need to be open and educate ourselves to embrace those diverse perspectives around us, and let them lead us. So I'll start by saying that.
Thank you.
I would add to that, to everything that Ms. Ayers just said, also our different religious groups at school, and making sure, again, just everything that she said as far as equal opportunities, services available, but really most important is just a comfort level and feeling like that all of our students are welcome at school and have the same opportunities regardless of, whoever they're sitting next to, they have the very same opportunities. But what's really important to me, and we'll speak to this, is people feeling comfortable in my classroom. And I've had to open my eyes that not every student is comfortable in every classroom in our 3 high schools. And so I'm very passionate about helping to make that happen.
Yeah, I'll jump in and add to that when we're discussing equity, especially if we set kind of race to the side for just a second, is that it's really about students having access to the tools that they need to achieve what they want to achieve, which I think that's a relatively uncontroversial way of looking at it. But one of the things we have to remember is that those tools aren't the same for every kid. And we're talking about different goals of what they want out of school. So, you know, it's not a cookie cutter situation. And so we have to be careful not to confuse equity with equality exactly. One kid might not have the same goal for even being in my classroom than the kid next to them does. So they might have different challenges at home. They might have different challenges as a learner. So we've got to include learning styles. We've got to include goals for the students. And we also have to recognize too that school districts don't have unlimited resources. So we can't be utopian about it either. It's just what do we put at the forefront of our thought process as an educator to try to get as many of those tools in the hands of the kids as we can. And of course, when I'm talking about tools, I don't just mean physical stuff. There are cognitive tools also that we have to be careful about and watch for.
Yeah, I'll follow up on that. 100% agree as far as we talking about equity beyond race. I mean, it's really a simple concept when you think about it. It's the idea of just giving, you know, student A needs, let's put numbers on this. Student A needs 5 things. Well, student B only needs 1, right? It's not a knock against student B. Student B only needed 1 thing, so they get that 1 thing. But student A over here needed a little bit more to be successful. So you give that student that, right? And it's not a knock on the other kid or a slight or something to be upset about. Is that kid needs a little bit more to be successful, and so that shouldn't be controversial, right? Like we should be all on the same team of giving these kids whatever they need to be successful. And so, simple put, I mean, I agree with Chris 100%, man. Like it's giving the kids what they need. Some kids need more than others, and so we got to find a way to get that to them.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm gonna jump in here real quickly too. I know you didn't need all of this to answer, but from a counseling perspective, mental health is, of course, something that's has grown in need in the district in the 16 years that I've been here. So when I think of equity as it relates to counseling services and especially mental health, I think about students who have IEPs and students who have 504s and students who are dealing with trauma at home and students who, you know, on a daily basis, you don't know who's going to show up. And so equity means we have to be sensitive to knowing that everyone doesn't have this wonderful life in the snap of your fingers or blink of an eye. Student A was great yesterday, but student A will be not great today. And so we have to be able to, you know, we have to be sensitive to that. And, you know, and being equitable sometimes means we have to be uncomfortable and we have to put ourselves aside, you know, or remember why we are here and what we're really here for, which is students. So we need different approaches.
I would just add, in thinking about my students and the different kids that come into my room and trying to meet each need, I'm thinking about some of my ELL students as well. I feel like we have this person that's, you know, takes care of our ELL kids around the building and our students from other countries, but sometimes, you know, their cultures are different, their religion is different, and beyond race, I do feel like I have so much to learn in that area just about how to serve all my students better, but I always feel a huge deficit with my students from other countries. I just always feel there's a, you know, sometimes a communication barrier and other things. So I think to me, you know, all of this wraps in one big package. Just all of our kids are so diverse. So
for our second question, it says, how can our schools change to increase tolerance and intersectionality?
The first answer I came up with for this question is that in my experience, the tolerance part of that question, it's really hard to substitute increasing tolerance by just having conversations. when we like you guys are doing right now, like you invited us to do right now, when you know a person and you feel like you've sat down from a table with them or in a room with them and have bounced ideas back and forth, so you know where they're coming from and they know where you're coming from, and you feel safe having those talks, then you start to see them as a human, and then you start to see them be in a broader context other than their political abstraction that we sometimes think of each other as. And so one of the things that we try to do in our class a lot is, I'm a music teacher, so we do music from all over the world all the time. Like that's just part of our normal everyday curriculum. It's built right into our curriculum, actually. And so it forces us to sit down and talk about what life would be like. And it naturally lends itself to these conversations. So there are, in order for that to be successful, though, you have to create a safe environment in the classroom to have those conversations and have them be real, and have people be open enough to have those conversations. And then I think the intersectionality part of the question, especially once I got that clarification, that's, to me, is something that we're doing at the district level, because that's kind of a systems question. The intersectionality part is kind of a systems question. Where are our disparities happening? How do we get at them? How do we help close some of the gaps?
Yeah, I'll follow that. A little bit, like for me, what I'm saying, just looking at this panel, it's just what I get from intersectionality and things of that nature is that it's the way that people from different backgrounds, encounter the world. It's like, so I'm looking at, 7 other people, and our experiences are all different. Like we've all had different walks, right? And so how you can increase, tolerance and respecting that of other people is having a little bit of empathy. I feel like that word is getting lost in the shuffle, in today's society, is that people aren't really willing to step outside of their own little, existence and see what it's like to maybe be Muhammad for a day, or Marissa, right? Or Chris, or whatever the case may be, right? And so the empathy piece is key. Like educators have to, not all, right, but some have to stop assuming that these children are just going to adjust when they say, all right, fix it, or whatever the case may be, right? And so these kids, these individuals, these adults, right, from all different backgrounds and experiences, if we have to learn more about each other and stop trying to prejudge and not listen to these kids, because these kids know what they're talking about, man. Like that's why we're sitting right here staring at each other right now, right? The kids are right. And so we need to step back, listen to them, empathize with them, and then you'll get way more out of them than whatever it is you're teaching in your class. Like that's secondary, right? Like I'm here to create positive citizens, people that want to come back, share experiences, say, hey, coach, I'm getting married. I just had a kid. This is awesome. My life is doing great. That's what I care about.
I'll follow Coach Jones with that. Something I'm excited about that we've been working on this summer and Mo's been a part of. We are working, and I've also talked with Ms. Gray about this. We are working on starting a BSU at Lee Summit West, and being able, we're talking about, we're in the final stages now as far as our vision, our goal, and things like that. But we have met, we have Zoomed, and we have approached administration. They're very supportive. In fact, we just heard back about our most recent paperwork submission. So we're trying to figure out now, and I'm sure after school, they figure out how school's going to open. We're figuring out how do we operate? How do we operate to have programs and to be able to show the students at Lee Summit West the leadership of our Black Student Union leaders and have programs, and it's going to be open to everyone. And I know we've picked Ms. Gray's brain, and we're looking forward to hopefully getting not only to work together, but if one gets established or if one is up and running at Lee Summit High School, to be able to have district programs where we can not only learn about Black culture, where we can, you know, our students can see our Black students leading and having programs, and also educating not just our student body, but our community.
Those are both terrific. Jumping off of the point about empathy and listening to one another, I think also it starts with a self-awareness and vulnerability in order to change. So in this work, I want to say I'm just as much a student as I am an educator in this work of learning and unlearning my own unconscious bias and my own systemic racism that I participated in. And so I feel like instead of feeling defeated or like we're being blamed, we need to embrace that vulnerability, be receptive to feedback, and then also just keep each other accountable in this work, because we are going to continue to make mistakes, but it's dangerous when we refuse to admit our mistakes, or use that as an opportunity to learn and to grow. And there's already so many wonderful resources out there for us to utilize. I love what Mrs. Ireland is talking about with the Black Student Union. I know our diversity committee at West has taken some time to put together some resources for all of us to use and to have those courageous conversations. So I think it just really starts, that change starts for us to kind of open our eyes and recognize that it's there, and that is how we can move forward. If we need to be self-reflective, like you said, Muhammad, at the beginning of this, ask ourselves how we can be better, ask how we perpetuated systemic oppression, and then go from there to make change.
But I really hope we can use the educational resources that we now have, the new motivation that it seems to be there, to move to a place of acceptance and loving that you're different and that we can coexist by being different, and we don't all have to be, you know, the same or think the same.
Thank you, Robin. I'm just going to jump in real quick. That's huge. Imagine what our students would feel like if they walked into the room and felt like we tolerated their presence.
Right.
We have to move from tolerance to being radically excited that they're there. Mm-hmm. Like that, those are two different moods altogether.
I think for real change, we have to bring, as far as like intersecting our populations, we have to do that purposefully. We have to say, you know, do you want to understand more about why our Muslim friends, you know, like to pray, you know, a certain way at a certain, you know, or why they fast? We're going to have a little come and go in one of our areas, and you can learn about it. And not in just a formal way, but actually bring kids together, because we all know that these conversations are easier to have with someone we care about or we have a good connection with. It's not comfortable to talk about these things and open these avenues up when we have no real relationship, because we don't know how they're going to be taken. So it's not really a safe place, right? So I think teachers can do a whole lot to lead this, but I think we've got to get our kids in it, and we've got to get our kids doing it, you know, to make everyone feel validated and understood, supported, and, you know, like Chris was saying, don't just tolerate them coming into your room, actually embrace their differences. So yeah, I think we've got to find a way and put some systems in place, some clubs, some committees to actually bring students and staff, but students together to have a more, you know, a better understanding of each other.
Yeah, I really love that. And also, I think we need to ask ourselves and our students the question, what strides are you making to surround yourself with diverse voices? So like, how can you diversify your bookshelf, your podcast, your media intake? Who are you following on social media? For me, I'm an ELA teacher, so a big part of that is books. Like, what books am I recommending to my students? What identities are they seeing in those books? And are they reading about people whose experiences and culture and religion and identity is different than them? So I think that is a good place to start as well, in terms of being exposed to those different voices.
We are going to move to the next question. So it says, why do you think it has taken so long for change to happen? Do you classify racism as a form of bullying?
I guess when you talk about change, like, I don't know, like, I hate to be the glass half empty guy, but like, I think we're a long way away from like actual change. I think this summer has been great, and I've had a lot of conversations with people, you know, and they talk about, you know, the strides that, you know, like, because it really has. This summer has been different when it's come to the social justice movement, things of that nature. It really has been different. Almost kind of like the straw that broke the camel's back a little bit with the, you know, murder of George Floyd and so on and so on. Now, change is going to take a long, like I tell my friends, like, I know, like, you got to have a stomach for this, because, you know, hundreds of years of building these systems are going to take longer than 3 months to destroy it. And so if you're really down for bringing about true change, you're going to have to be down for it for more than a summer. You're going to have to, you know, when school starts back up, you're going to have to live it, right? You're going to have to breathe it. And so it can only change if this doesn't just start, if this doesn't become a fad. Like, if it's just a little thing that we did for the summer to post on the social media and be like, yo, we're good now. I posted my meme, or I did my Blackout Tuesday, whatever the case may be, then it'll go away until the next tragedy. But if we're really about change, then we're going to keep this thing going, keep using the momentum and keep pushing until, and to me, true change looks like leadership, like, and I'm talking about everywhere, leadership in schools, leaderships in businesses, leaderships in, you know, boardrooms, you know, admin, all that stuff, right? Like, true change looks like who you bringing in. Like, you can't talk about change when you look at, you know, the boardroom and it all looks the same, right? Because, you know, leadership, people making the decisions, if everybody's, you know, the same, you know, folks, nothing's going to change. So you got to get that leadership in there from top to bottom, to really bring about change. And I think we can do it, but it's going to take longer than the summer. So.
Yeah, I would jump in and say that the first part of the question, and I'm going to come back to some things Coach Jones said, because I totally agree with him. The first part of the question, why has it taken so long? Being a history teacher, as is Coach Jones, you know, we can talk about, and I know there's a curriculum question later, so I won't go into that right now, but a lot of people, well, not a lot of people, most people do not understand systemic racism and do not understand how, and that's why by reading, or, you know, start like knowing your history, knowing about, you know, the Voting Rights Act, knowing, but then back it up, knowing about after, you know, the Civil War and that Reconstruction, you know, that, yes, Black Americans were supposed to be guaranteed full freedoms, and they weren't. And what does that look like? Not just educating yourself on that, but then how do you change that? And that's where I'm going to come back to what Coach Jones said about leadership. And as a country, we have got to stop electing racist, discriminatory leaders at the local, state, and national levels. And also our leaders, as he was also alluding to, within corporations and in, you know, in any workplace, that people who have, if they are not, and social media has made it so we know we know leaders' positions on things. And we just cannot accept that leaders continually are getting into powerful positions that are not willing, not willing to make the needed change to keep us moving forward as a society. But one of the reasons I think, again, it has taken so long is that I don't think people fully understand systemic racism. And before I hush, make sure as far as racism as a form of bullying, I think there is bullying within racism. And I think racism is much bigger, though, just like what we're talking about with systemic racism.
I could jump in there because there's a point that Rhonda just made that is really important, that when she mentioned that most people don't understand systemic racism. And I'll do another super nerdy word definition point, because of course most of us would know just by a quick jump into Merriam-Webster dictionary that racism has two different meanings that are primary at the top of the dictionary. And this question does a really good job, and I don't know if it was intentional, but it does a good job of combining both of those. There is a definition of racism that has to do with a personal belief, meaning I am part of a superior race to you. That's one way. That's one term of definition of racism. And then, of course, there's the systems definition, which is again, it's a zoomed out meta-analysis of disparity, right? And when the reality is that when most people, keep in mind, we're all academics, we're all plugged into the current lingo and we study this kind of stuff, but the average person doesn't. And so when they hear systemic racism, they usually plug the original definition from 1902, which is the first time it appeared in print in the New York Times, that word, which meant a personal belief. They plug that meaning into the conversation. And so I think one of the things that we can do as educators is when we have these conversations, and this goes from, again, I grew up in Lee Summit, and I remember Lee Summit in the 1980s and the 1990s. So I don't mean to contradict anything, but it has changed. If you're thinking in terms of that first definition, that personal belief definition. I mean, I don't know if this is going to be too much of a story, but I remember Lee Summit High School in the 1990s where I saw a young black boy hung from the goalpost of the football field while the rest of the team walked inside and started first hour and left him there. No one was in trouble. It was considered hazing. It was like a team activity, and the football coaches didn't care. And the custodian went out and cut him down, and everybody went along with their day. That would not happen now, right? But so I'm not trying. I don't mean to get off on a soapbox here. But my point is, if we don't lead with that conversation of let's make sure we're clear about what type of racism is it that we are attacking, then I think, and again, this comes from somebody who's grown up in this town around a lot of white people, we might be able to get past some of that defensiveness that comes out when we talk about systemic racism. If we kind of lead with those definitional things of say, yeah, okay, we recognize that some of those types of stuff aren't happening anymore, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a whole community of kids that are not being able to access the systems the same way that other kids are. And then we might open the minds of some people who are not academically plugged in to this conversation.
If I can jump in here on that point, Chris. So the second definition of racism, which more is about the power. So racism as a power construct.
Yep.
Who or what entity has the power? So when I look at the question, why do you think it has taken so long to change? It's because the people who have the power don't want it to change, or very slow to acknowledge that change needs to happen. So until we get the people who have the power to influence change, and that is leadership on our schools, that is our school board, that is our superintendent, that is the city of Lee Summit, that is the government, that is any individuals I mean, that's us also. We have the power over ourselves, but we're talking structures and thinking where there's an imbalance of power. So change isn't going to happen in at our local level, in our buildings, in our classrooms, or anything. It doesn't have to happen because there's not the thought that anything needs to happen or change. There's no urgency that there's anything majorly wrong. So we don't need to put things in place to address a problem that we don't see is really there. So that's why, to me, it's taken so long. I've been in this district 16 years. If you ask me if I've seen change in 16 years, it's been minuscule change, probably more change the last 3 years than I've seen. And I've been on diversity teams. I've been active as much as I allowed myself to be. When I say it that way, I'm exhausted, at this point, honestly, with things that have happened or not happened. So until we can get the powers that be to see that it's important, it's left on you and me individually just to do what it is we need to do. And yes, racism to me is one of the first forms of bullying. It is a form of bullying, and it's the historical form that's been in existence for hundreds of years, and we've just perpetuated it even more.
Yeah, I want to echo what Robin is saying. Like, it has to be a community-wide commitment. So we really need to be taking these conversations and making sure that they are translating to anti-racist action. So it needs to happen at the bottom and at the top as well. So it's not just, I talked a lot about the individual and self-reflection, but unless the individual who is self-reflecting is taking action, like questioning the rules in our handbook or auditing their curriculum or having these tough conversations with colleagues, then it's going to continue to not change. And then we have the danger of it becoming a trend, like Jason was saying, for just the summer, if we don't take these conversations and use them to propel us forward in that anti-racist action.
And real quick before you move on, Mohammed, like, I think we got to start having like real conversations with our colleagues, especially, when that hashtag came out. I'm new to the district. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I'm from Kansas City, but this is my 4th year in the district. But I'm scrolling through some of that stuff, and I'm seeing like people I don't know, but they're teachers, and kids are finally like expressing themselves of the microaggressions, the major aggressions, the open bigotry they were like dealing with. And I'm here to say, like, if we're seeing some of our colleagues or we're hearing some stuff, we got to start knocking that stuff, man, down. Like, when we see it, or you hear about Mrs. So-and-so said this or Mr. So-and-so said that, we need to go knock on somebody's door and have a conversation. Like, is this really going on in here? Like, we are all adults. And so if we're letting these kids, walk into these rooms with these people that feel like this about them and people like them, we're just as culpable, man. So like, we got to stop being quiet when we know that Mr. So-and-so or Miss So-and-so is like that in classes, or they say certain stuff to kids. We got to start saying something, some way. Send an email, like, you ain't got to go beat nobody up or something, but you can send a message and let them know that, hey, this is what I'm hearing. I hope this ain't true. What's up?
The 4th question says, as a parent, how can I help those affected directly or indirectly?
Well, I think it starts with the willingness to, again, what are you doing in your own home? What are you teaching your kids? What are you saying that they're overhearing? Being inquisitive about what experiences your kids are having at school. Communication. It has to be an open line of communication with your kids, and you have to ask questions, and you have to be a listener. You have to listen to what they're saying, what they're hearing, and the messages that you're giving them. And as Marissa said, it's time to start practicing being anti-racist
Well, and I'll jump on because like Robin, I am both an educator in the district and a parent in the district. And so what I have really had to come to terms with is my students know in my classroom, I am anti-racist. And I have followed up with incidences and handled things. What I had to come to grips with is that the things I've been tolerant outside of my classroom or in my own home or in my community. And I think as a parent, and this, I've really come to grips with this summer, I have had a conversation with another parent about things that just are not, that are wrong, and that things aren't funny, and that you can't laugh off memes that you think are funny. And it's really been, or memes or saying things and then, you know, putting something out there on social media and taking it down. And so what I've really looked at and really have grappled with this summer is I asked myself, I've been anti-racist in my classroom for years. So why have I been tolerant of things in my own home or even out in the community? And that's where I've been uncomfortable, and I've worked through that discomfort and realized, just like Robin said, that doesn't last forever. And I'm not afraid to use my voice. Why would I, not only in my own home, but out in the community or even in my neighborhood? And that's where I've really grown this summer. And besides reading and besides having a lot of conversations with my children, having, Marissa alluded to this earlier, our diversity team has done some great supportive measures this summer, whether it's a joint viewing of 13th, we participated in a nationwide webinar, and a debrief after that, and to hear educators from around the nation, not that it was comforting, but educators across the nation are grappling with this. And then there were solutions, you know, people were talking about, hey, read this, this is good for that, or you could say this. And I think being able to have that support at school is eye-opening. But again, back to the question, as a parent, I completely agree with Robin's comments about the open line of communication and being okay with being uncomfortable. Realize that in that discomfort that you're going to grow. And I think that speaks to her point, backing up a couple of questions ago. I think it would have been better worded if we could have said, how do we move beyond tolerant?
How culturally relevant is the content being taught?
So I teach reading, and there's really no curriculum for what I do because every kid comes in with something different. And we just teach to that child whatever they need. And my classes are a little bit smaller, et cetera. But I work really hard at making sure that we have people in the things that we are reading and researching that look like my students, have the same religion as my students, are young people like my students, whatever it is. So that they're not just learning about, excuse me, you know, old white guys, literally. So I think I work really hard at that. I can't speak, though, to what the rest of the district does. And so I know there's this greater conversation about, you know, the kinds of literature that we're putting in front of our kids, asking them to read. And, you know, I think, again, it needs to be something that we all work through together. I don't think it should just be educators going to some other building across town and talking with themselves about it. I think lots of people need to be involved. I think kids need to be involved. Parents need to be involved. Yes, we know how to teach. We know what the state or whoever says is the best thing for us to teach, but how can we reach our kids? And so I just think kids are much more willing to learn, obviously, when the content is relevant. And so I think that's something we can all work on doing. I just think us going somewhere else and sitting and deciding what our kids are going to learn, I don't know, I feel like the kids should have, or the community should have, some kind of input.
I would say follow up with Carol. I mean, I agree with what Carol says, especially the first thing she said is like, it depends on the teacher. Like, it depends on the teacher. It depends on who you get. It depends on what that teacher deems important. It depends on what that teacher deems relevant to their course, right? Like what they think they, you know. And so one thing I do like about where I am is that, you know, I don't have people, you know, knocking on my door every day, you know, staring over my shoulder. I have a lot of autonomy. And so when we talk about American history, I get to move that thing all around. And so, you know, it's one thing I strive to do, like you said earlier, Carol, is I try to make direct connections. So something that happened in, I don't know, 1929, I say, well, that's why it's like this in 2020. And then they go, oh, okay, that makes sense. You know what I'm saying? So instead of just keeping it, I never keep the information in that time frame. I always try to push it to where it is now. And so depending on who you get, like I said, I learn stuff every year. You know what I'm saying? I learned stuff today or yesterday when Muhammad sent these questions out, right? Like, okay, I had to look up some stuff and refresh myself on some stuff. So it depends on who you get. So if you get you a Carol, you're in good shape, because Carol's is gonna do stuff for your kids that is conducive to them. Like, it's gonna help them learn, and she's working for your children. And so that's the thing, we got to get to a point. Like, if your teacher decides it's relevant, then they're going to put that in their curriculum. And if you're dealing with some people that maybe are a little bit behind or struggling with this, you know, current cultural climate, they won't. But they'll teach your kids, but you won't get maybe some of the things that you should get.
Yeah, I want to piggyback off what Jason said when he mentioned that it depends on who the teacher is, right? So there is some truth to that, even if the curriculum is really well written. That there are still, and again, part of this is that I'm always cautious about being, you know, having a utopian outlook on any of these things. The reality is that we do have a limited resources and limited time with the students, meaning, you know, there's this idea in creating curriculums that what you're leaving out is just as important as what you're teaching. And I agree with that, but at the same time, we get them for 50 minutes a day, right? We do have to leave stuff out. So then the goal for us should be to diversify as much input as we possibly can. So in the insight I'd like to give from the music side of this is that, like I mentioned before, you know, our curriculum kind of already naturally lends itself to diversification, but the teacher, this is kind of plays onto what Jason said, the teacher still is in danger of falling into ruts. So for example, if I'm going to program a concert, let's say I've got diversity on my mind, but my favorites as the teacher might be music from England, West Africa, and Brazil. Okay, so I do a concert like that, but then I love that music so much that I without thinking about it, I've programmed 2 or 3 concerts with music from those places, and I think I'm being diverse, but I'm falling into a pattern. And then eventually those things are my pattern. That's what my students come to think of as diversity. And that's not really diversity. That's like 3 places. So there is a self-examination, even though a music program would be quite boring if all of our music was from the same place. So we do kind of do that already, but I do think that there's room for every teacher to kind of examine. I'll tell a personal story that it's a little bit vulnerable about this topic. I was last years old, and I'm 40, when I learned from a colleague that there is this whole group of Black composers that write music that's not gospel, jazz, and spirituals. And I've got a master's degree in music, and no one had ever taught me about any of those people. And so I go to this convention, and this colleague of mine that was what his dissertation was. So he's presenting all this information, and I'm going, I had no idea. I'd never heard of that guy, never heard of that guy, never heard of that guy. He starts playing this music, And so, of course, we pulled it into the classroom the very next year, and we started introducing these concepts. So you can't assume that you already know the breadth of the subject matter that you're teaching. There's always something to figure out.
I think also, as much as it's an individual effort, we have to keep each other accountable in like our collaboration groups. So like if you're doing something to really highlight diverse voices, you need to also, it's my job to make sure that I'm communicating this with my other teachers and making sure that they are doing that work as well. So no teacher should have to feel like an island. We should really be able to have those courageous conversations that you guys were talking about earlier, to really talk in those groups and make sure that the curriculum changes don't stop with you. Making sure that they are, that we're working collectively towards change. And we just had a makeover of our ELA curriculum to make sure that we're not revolving our units around, we read this novel, just this soul novel by this old white guy. And so I think to help continue challenging us, we have to work together in that. But even though we just have gone through this curriculum makeover, we have to, I'm working currently to introduce a new novel, and we do a lot of choice reading now, but we do have like one whole class novel per year at each of the grade levels. And right now I'm working to make sure that that voice is a diverse voice and not just the same voices that have been heard for hundreds of years.
To answer that question, as curriculum and a former curriculum director, our social studies curriculum needs to have it really needs an overhaul, and it needs to be more culturally relevant. And it also, again, needs to focus on the success and just the story, not portray our marginalized groups as victims, if I'm going to be honest. So that's, again, something I'm very passionate about because, and Jason, you know this from your world history colleagues at North, you know, the world history curriculum, even though individuals do try to truly make it a world history class, it's European history.
The sixth question it's kind of two-part. How can teachers provide more resources and or educate their students about mental health? And what support does our district have in place for mental illness?
Well, I guess I'll start since I'm a counselor. I'm not sure like specifically what departments or like individual subject departments address anything from mental health perspective, but the counseling department has, and each building has a mental health protocol, so to speak. So if a student is in harm, either personally or knows someone is in harm, and in our building, we have specifically told teachers to, communicate with the counselor and/or administrator. And if a student, if you know directly that a student is in harm, then the expectation is for you to follow through with another step, and not if they're suicidal or something like that, then we can't wait for it to be in a counselor's hand before that issue is addressed. So each school is supposed to have a mental health protocol with specific administrators, the resource officer, the counselors, and a step-by-step, this is what you do if, this is what you do if. If we're just talking mental health, general anxiety that a student's experiencing, depression, things of that nature, we definitely expect or want those things to be passed on to the guidance department, where we will, we're not counselors. That's the one thing that parents and sometimes other staff realize or forget, is that we're not mental health specialists. We actually have not taken classes on mental health, and we're not certified evaluators of mental health. We do have a the specific name of the assessment escapes me right now, but we do have an assessment that we use with students when they are sent to us. So we can try to evaluate very briefly if they are low concern, a mid concern, or a high concern, and then we take the appropriate steps based on what the concern is. So if you don't know of that protocol in your buildings, then please ask your counseling department and their administration to make sure you're educated about that. The district has a list of mental health resources that everyone has access to. We have a page. I don't know if you guys have ever been to it, but the district has a student resource, mental health resource page with community resources listed on that page, as well as district resources for things that students may need or parents may need. We of course have a EAP for our own employees in the district, so our employee assistance program is in place for our employees who may be experiencing their own level of anxiety or depression or mental health issues or trauma or whatever the case may be. So we try to put as much, I think we really do try to put as much in place as we can, but but we are, like I said, if it's a serious concern, then we are referring out and we are offering resources for parents to follow up with, because we're not diagnosing and we are not treating. None of us are licensed to treat, and that would be like a dual relationship anyway. So that's not something we can do. We are just school counselors in that role in the building as a school counselor. So,
but when I came over to the district from my last school district, I was shocked to find out that the school did not have, where I came from, we had grade level interventionists. So we had a 9th grade interventionist that kind of, worked with the 9th graders, 10th grade interventionist, 11th grade, 12th grade. And so the interventionist job was kind of played like the middleman between counselors, administrators. And so they were there to kind of be the buffer between the kid and, whatever issues that were going on. So if the interventionists could handle the issues, they got it done, right? If there was something, that they needed some assistance on, they kicked it and worked with the administrator. So I know, every year education is getting more defunded, but I think it would help to have like additional people inside the schools that these kids could get to, whether that be. Go ahead, Robin. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say one thing that I missed is social workers. We don't have enough social workers. I hope someone from the district is going to be watching this. But we are blessed to have in-house a social worker that, even before the district put social workers in place, but it's like one social worker who works with one level or the track of like Lee Summit West, and we have one for Lee Summit, and we have one who works with Lee Summit North schools, and they've broken it up somehow. But even before that, we had our own social worker in the building, and she's not enough. Just her in our building, and we have to share her when the district took on or approved the role of social workers in whatever capacity or definition they have for them. We have to now share our social worker with a couple other schools. We need more of that because mental health concerns are increasing, and we oftentimes feel so inadequate. I don't want to speak for all of us, but we do. I think I can comfortably, because we have this discussion at district level all the time. We feel very inadequate with being able to address the number of mental health issues that come through our office on a daily basis.
I would just add real quickly that, of course, teachers, we're not qualified to diagnose or provide treatment either. But we serve an important role because and of course, I think everyone would agree that no teacher forms the same bond with every student, because that's a two-way street. We have kids that we know better than others, and there's a lot of that. But just making yourself available to be a safe place to bounce off problems with, that can be important, even because sometimes all a kid needs is to feel like there's at least one adult in the building that they could go to and talk to. Just sometimes by being open and vulnerable in front of the students, that let them know that you're here for them if they need you, can be the door creaking open just a little bit, which can give a vulnerable kid a chance to kind of peek their head through, with my metaphor, and just say, hey, I need to talk to somebody.
We are going to move on. Thank you, by the way. We're going to move on to our 7th question. What impacts do you think the stereotypes of the different high schools have on the student body? How can we support each other as a collective school district?
I'm going to jump in on that one because I teach at Lee Summit High School, but my kids attended Lee Summit West. And before I taught, when my kids were at West, before I taught at Lee Summit, yeah, it's a different narrative, and it's really not okay. It needs to change. I don't know. I get the whole rivalry piece, but it feels like there's more here. So it just feels off. It feels a little like there's a little more kind of push between. I don't know so much about North because I don't obviously have any real connection there, but I just know that there is a feeling at Lee Summit High School among the students and staff that some parts of our school are so much better, but that the Lee Summit West population has a different feeling towards us. And then I feel like there's a completely different narrative in my neighborhood around Lee Summit West being the best in the district or whatever. And then, touting tests and, our test scores and this and that. I just think, do we need that? How does that help us? How does that make us better? I get the rivalry, the fun rivalry thing, and the whole competitive nature of sports. And of course, we all want to win. We want our school to win. But I just feel like, and I don't know that I don't think it's political. I think it's more like socioeconomic. I'm not really sure. It's just icky. And I think it really needs to change. I think we need to find ways to bring our 3 schools together instead of focusing on, well, West has this and Lee Summit's the old school and whatever, and North is whatever. I just think we focus a lot on our differences, and gosh, we're all literally could be within walking distance of each other. So I feel like that is a huge issue in this district that I didn't realize until I worked at one school and I live in the community of another.
That's actually it's funny because I was going to start with that. I actually have a similar background with Carol in this case. My kids live in the Lee Summit West attendance area. They're not high school age yet, so we haven't gotten to that point. But I actually don't mind it if it sticks to sports. Like if it lives in the sports ecosystem of being then that's like natural to sports. But if it starts to creep into the society and culture of the school, that's, I think, where it crosses a line. And of course, this came to a head for us in Lee Summit, as we all know, during the discussions about the boundary changes.
As an outsider to the district, what I'm saying, or newly to the district, that's the first thing that came to my mind was when they were talking about redrawing those district lines, and you would thought that in a district that is affluent, to me, right, Lee Summit West is the rich white school. right? In a rich white district, Lee Summit West is a rich white school. North is the black school, because for whatever reason, right? Maybe because we got a black head coach and we got some black people on staff and things of that nature. So we're the black school. And I don't know much about Lee Summit. I don't know what they say about Lee Summit. I just know we get the moniker of having, you know, I guess a decent amount of people of color, and West is the rich white one with all the bells and whistles. But I'm with Chris. I would love to keep the rivalry, of course, sports and activities and all that stuff related. But as far as the culture aspect, you do feel it. You know what I mean? Especially for me, you know, when you go, you talk to people, you know, you, like you said, you go on Facebook and you hear people talking about certain stuff, you see it and you feel that difference between all three high schools.
But how does it affect our students' learning is the important thing. And I do think that there isn't an aspect where expectation is already set up if you are in a certain building. The expectation, if you're at West, is that you're already smarter, you're expected to do well, even though we know everyone, you know, all the levels of performance are experienced at every school. But it's like the expectation, it's like you're capable of doing well if you go here. And if you go over here, you might not be as capable of doing well simply because you go to school here. And if you go to school here, it's almost going to be a miracle if you do well. And so I think we just need to dismantle that. Like, we need to address it as educators, and as it comes up and as we hear it, because we know we hear it, you know, we hear them talking about it playfully or not. We just have to address it.
Well, and I'd add to that, I think that if, like I was talking about earlier, I know the Titan BSU group that's just getting started, and I've talked with Robin about, you know, us working together. If all three schools can work together and bring those kids together, because I know, like, for instance, I also work with youth and government. I know a lot of my students, my Titan youth and government students, are buddies with Bronco youth and government students and Tiger youth and government students, because they're all in debate. And so they all, you know, it's a real collegial feel. And I think if we can promote students working together from all three high schools, I think that will also show our community the awesome capabilities that comes from all three of our high schools.
The eighth question kind of leads and goes back to the first question. It says, do you endorse equality of outcome, or is equality of opportunity sufficient enough to ensure fair learning practices in our district?
I guess I'll start on this one too. So I'm going to take this outside of my answer, outside of the race and even demographic thing, and I'm just going to talk about my own two children. One of my sixth grader is on an IEP. She is a brilliant soul. She learns slowly. She learns in a different way than other kids do. And because she doesn't have a diagnosable disorder, it took us 3 years to convince her school to put her on an IEP, even though she had been repeated a grade, fallen behind, not yet she can watch a movie or read a book and have it memorized, right? She can recite the entire plot. There's a brain up there, but she was not being able to learn the way she was being taught, right? So she was being given the same tools that all the other students were, but it was not helping her until eventually she got the help that she needed, and she's still behind. She's trying to make up for all that lost time. Then there's my other child, my son, who's in third grade, who is also smart, but he learns in a traditional way, which means he can go to school, kind of pay attention, and just keep up, right? They're two kids who are genetically the same. They have the same parents. They've got the same support at home. They've got all these things, but they're two kids that are very, very different. So they've been given the same equality of opportunity, but their outcomes will never be the same no matter what, because they learn in a different way. And so I think it's a nice goal to say that we want everything to be equal. I just think we have to be careful that we don't cross a line into putting cookie cutter one size fits all solutions around kids.
Yeah, I'll follow up on Chris, man. Like, he used this word earlier, and I like to use it in class too. The idea that there is no such thing as utopia, man. Like, it just can't happen. Like, all this stuff looks really cool, but to me, like he was saying, I don't think either is really possible. I guess if I had to lean one, I would go equality of opportunity, right? Like, you want people to have their chances of being successful. And so when I talk to my kids, and this usually comes up in what are we talking about? Usually some kind of economic capitalism, industrialization unit or whatever. We're talking about opportunity, right? And, I go on my little dad talk and I tell each and every one of them, based on who you were born to, how you were brought up, whatever the case may be, some of you are going to get more opportunities to succeed in life than others, right? Like your dad, your mom and dad might be wealthy. So, you can stub your toe 5 times and dad and mom are going to be right there to get you back on track. But I did tell all my kids, though, that I do believe in the idea that at least that all of us, and that means, all my kids in my classes are going to get one shot. Now, it could be when you're 19, it could be when you're 29, but your window of opportunity, you will get one.
Well, we will move on to our last question. What are your plans as an educator about racism in schools? What do you plan to do for the 2020-2021 school year?
I'll start on that one. I lead our Tiger Mentor program. It's kind of like the Titan Time thing that you guys have at West. I don't know what Lee Summit North does around that. It's not the same as West because we don't do it every day. I really think this has kind of opened up a thought process for me of how I can use that platform to further this. And I really think pulling our kids of different areas together is going to be really important. So what I'm going to do is have my Tiger mentors, who are the ones that mentor the freshmen when they come in, form some committees and plan some activities around how can we get our kids together around differences. Every type of student, every type of difference can be addressed, and we can do some fun activity around it, even if it's just, hey, it's I don't know, Chinese New Year, come, we're going to have a celebration, we're going to have a little such and such, we're going to have snacks, or like I mentioned before, learning more, about the Muslim faith and understanding why some of our friends do the things that they do, and try to pull kids together in a social way, because as teachers, we understand that when you can attach an emotion to something, it runs deeper. As the kids say, it hits different, right? So if you can get them emotionally involved through socializing or whatever else, you're gonna get a better buy-in. So that's kind of where I'm going in my mind. I don't know. We have to, obviously, this year's going to just be a mess. So we have to see what our school year is even going to look like at this point. But I think we can still push through and do some things for positive things around this.
To add to that, I think a lot of the courageous conversations that happen a lot of times, and I don't know how this is going to look as if we continue to go virtual, but they happen during informal interactions in your classroom and with students. And so we need to stop preaching and start listening and also addressing mistakes that we make, because if you build that relationship with your students, they will tell you when you make a mistake. And it's a really big moment of vulnerability for you to say, wow, I really did make that mistake. And it's happened to me. It happened to me 2 years ago. And I said, you know what, I made that mistake. Thank you so much for telling me. I need to continue to grow and do better. And that shows that we're a community that is really working to get better together. And so I think those informal conversations are really key. And also at the curriculum level, obviously I'm going through an auditing curriculum, but with my collab team, it's not just me as a teacher island working, looking for those diverse voices, but also it's really important to highlight student voices and look for those opportunities for them to share their experiences through their writing and through what they're reading. And Mrs. Humphreys also talked about this in the first webinar, but we are having our second African American read-in that's district-wide. That will be in February this year. Again, I don't know really what that's going to look like, what our world's going to look like, but trying to bring those pieces where diverse voices can share those experiences, for me, I think is really important.
One of the things that I've been doing a lot of thinking about lately in my program, in the choir program, is kind of around one topic related to social justice and diversity stuff that we haven't really discussed today, which is representation. And one of the short version of the story of the program that when I came to Lee Summit High School 15 years ago to start teaching was that the choir program at the top level, the most elite choir on campus, was just super white. Like it was the whitest. And we started having conversations about that all the way back then of, you know, what is the barrier here? Because of course, none of the teachers, you know, we do blind auditions, and we're not trying to exclude anybody. We want everybody there. And the short version of the story then over the next 10 or 15 years, just by having that conscious goal of diversifying the program, last year and the year before, we got to the point where the top chamber choir at our school was just about over a third people of color, which is huge in that amount of time. And one of through conversations with students, I can kind of trace that back about 7 or 8 years ago to 2 or 3 students, popular young Black boys, in my case, who were athletes, 4.2 GPAs, popular kids who I had to beg for years to be in the choir, and they finally did it. And then the younger kids were able to look up to them and say, you know what, choir is apparently not as white as I thought. I'll do it too. Representation matters, because if they can't, if my students come into the program in 9th grade and they look up at the 11th and 12th graders that are excelling and being held up as the best students in the school, and none of them look like me, then right away I'm going to write it off. I'm going to write off that activity as something I can't do. Once that changed, we started to turn it around.
I was going to say, I'm excited, regardless of what school looks like, of continuing to work with our BSU leaders and make sure that they have every success possible. And also, regardless of what platform of school that we're on, to make sure that they have a voice. Whether if we are virtual, do we hold conversations like this and invite students to it? Do we hold a Zoom like with a speaker like this? Do we do pods? Do we post stuff like this to the YouTube, make a YouTube channel? So I'm excited about that. But personally, I've added 2 different authors in my classroom library, and I've been also reading them, read through them, such as Stamped and the new Jim Crow. It's not a new book, but it came out again. And also as a teacher, and I'm excited to share this, Susie Humphreys last fall, one of our PDs, gave a PD session on grading for equity. That's what I stepped away to go get. So I'm working through this right now, and I'm excited to continue what she got me excited about last fall, and then to also encourage some of my other colleagues, or all of my other colleagues, to take it and read it, and really for our administration to do more with it as a staff. And those are my actionable items I'm going to do.
For me, this year, I think I'm going to put an emphasis on continuing to empower the youth, right? Like that's how we got here, right? I got the email from, from these students, you know what I'm saying? And so my job is going to keep telling these young people to keep going, right? Keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going. Because, we're talking about racism, right? Like, it's not going anywhere. Like, let's be clear. Like we're never going to eliminate racism, but the goal, right, should be for us to move so far, to move the needle so far this way that the people that are stuck over here in their old ways are obsolete. They're just screaming into a wind tunnel and no one can hear them, right? We just leave them people there and the rest of us keep progressing. So if we keep going and the kids keep going and they get more kids and those kids get more kids and we can keep this snowball effect keep growing and growing, we will drown those other people out that refuse to change. And they can stay racist in their own bubbles and in places in their community, but they will no longer have a voice when it comes to true changes in our community. So that my job is just going to keep this thing rolling so we can keep the momentum going from year to year to year.
Well, from the counseling perspective, or one as the BSU sponsor at LSN, we hope to further our activities and the things that we do this school year. We just started the BSU last year, and with no format, no form, no template, I just started it. I'm just like, you know what? This is starting. And so we just kind of shot from the hip. So this year I'm hoping to be, of course, much more organized and give it much more student voice. That's the one thing that West probably has on us, is that the students it sounds like have driven that over there and really are saying, this is what we want. So, and then counseling, from the counselor perspective, I was invited to participate as or help with the position paper with MSCA, which is the Missouri School Counselors Association. And so they're doing a position paper on being anti-racist. And so I'm hoping that I would like to, after that position paper is published, to bring that into LSR7 at the district level and see what we are doing or what we are going to do in our counseling departments at every level to be anti-racist.
Thank you all for the questions, and thank you, panelists, for giving your point of view and clarity on these subjects. It is clear that our mission is simple and has one clear goal: to have members of our community ask the questions to educators from our community, to minimize the disparity of marginalized people. I believe that it is our responsibility to teach and answer questions that will prevent events from repeating itself in the future generations. We must educate not only the leaders of tomorrow that are in this community, but we must also set the foundation of what LSR7 can be. Thank you all again, and if you have not already done so, check out the first panel on the LSW Student Senate YouTube channel.